Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee, ready to start my day. And I thought I would cover something with you guys today. And this is a response to a lot of times when I mention certain things aren't particularly good for training. That, yeah, you might get a training effect, you might not. That other things are better. You always get people who come in and say things like, well, have you tried it? I bet you can't do it. It's really difficult. As if we're dealing with some sort of competition. And it could be anything from talking about weighted one-legged pistol squats to whatever calisthenics people are talking about, or burpees or anything else. And what people need to understand is that just because something is challenging or you perceive it as difficult to do doesn't mean that it's going to give you a good training effect. And it doesn't mean that it's anywhere near the best thing for you to do for any given goal. And I was reminded of that when I always see on YouTube, there's commercials coming through fitness right now for like this whatever X bar or something, to where these people have this thing on the floor and this bar that puts bands to, and they stand on it, they do all sorts of exercises. They do everything from deadlifts to curls. And in the little video, you always see the guy struggling to curl it, right? Well, sure, he's struggling. It's difficult. But does anyone out there honestly think that that guy is going to get a better training response in his biceps versus if he just did a barbell curl or a heavy weighted chin-ups? In fact, I think we could argue based upon the evidence that he's going to get a lesser training effect from what he's doing. All right, and he might perceive it as difficult. You might be shaking because it's so hard and exhausting. Does that mean that it's going to give an appropriate training response? In people's minds, when we start talking about this difficult stuff, it does. They're like, oh, yeah, obviously, because you're working hard. Well, does that always ensure a proper training response? No. I mean, you go look at the evidence on partials, you're essentially that's a partial exercise. Because when you have such a steep accommodating resistance on a single joint movement that at the bottom, you have almost no resistance, and at the top, you have 5 times the resistance, you're basically getting the equivalent of just doing a half rep. What do all the studies that have been done on partials that are half reps show? An extreme accommodating resistance is essentially a half rep. That's what it represents, and that's what a device like this would represent. That even if you have a heavier weight, like let's say you are able to lift double the weight through the top half of the exercise versus the whole thing, and you take it to failure, you gain less muscle and less strength from the half rep. Right? Multiple studies have shown this. It still feels hard, but there's less potential for muscle fiber recruitment also. Furthermore, doing something like that on a single joint exercise, all this bands and shaking, hell, your possibility of ripping something is actually existent too. You're actually carrying a higher risk of injury with less muscle stimulation, but it's hard. You guys see the problem with that mindset? It doesn't mean that it's even equal to just doing a traditional bicep exercise. And the same thing, they're trying to do deadlifts with it and stuff, and it's the same thing. They're struggling at the top and shaking. And, well, we also know that rack pulls above the knees, which is what it's replicating with these bands, have higher injury rates and less muscle growth, even in the muscles you're trying to work, because, again, we're dealing with partials. No benefit there. And what I would say to that, people who think that it's all about that, I'm like, do you guys really think that's how people train to win anything? Let's talk about athletics. Let's talk about sports. Let's not even talk about just muscle building or power sports or strength sports. Let's talk about even endurance sports. Does anyone out there think that the best way to train for a marathon is to get out and just run to exhaustion every day? To get up first thing in the morning, eat your breakfast, go take a run, and run until you are absolutely exhausted without a stop, and you're on the ground puking almost. And if you got up and did that every single morning, 7 days a week, that would be extremely difficult. It would be extremely exhausting. Do you think if that's how you train for a marathon that you're going to beat the person who actually uses an appropriate training protocol? Do you think you're actually going to win? If they have similar genetic potential, similar training age, everything else, and they're put on a structured running program combined with a proper strength training program, because, yeah, we know that barbell squats improve your marathon times and your long distance cycling times. That's not even debated anymore. That's not even debated anymore in the sports science. So let's say they go on an appropriate running protocol that doesn't leave them puking and on the ground panting ever, combined with a proper strength training program, do you think that you're going to beat them by doing the other method? Highly unlikely. That's not how champion endurance athletes train. But you trained harder and it was really, really difficult. You pushed yourself till you were puking every day. What people need to understand is that all training has a stress recovery adaptation cycle. And yes, your endurance would probably improve doing that. I'm not saying it wouldn't, but do you think that you're going to be able to compete against a guy who follows a proper running protocol written by someone who does understand how to do that, who actually is varying their distances, and they're actually on a completely structured, well-written marathon running prep program combined with a proper strength program? You're not going to beat them, even though you perceive that you worked harder. So when people start saying stuff and they're talking about, well, you're talking about these pistol squats being, not as good as a barbell squat for building overall strength. Well, have you tried them? Why do I need to? Why do I need to try your exercise when I can look at the data and what all the experts and best coaches look at and realize it wouldn't actually help me that much? It might be hard, and I might perceive it that way, particularly someone like me with Meniere's disease. Yeah, the balance component of it might be difficult, but that's all you're dealing with. You're dealing with a balance component. You're not going to build the same amount of strength. You don't see anyone who does very large amounts of one-legged exercises they actually have to produce strength with both legs at the same time, particularly with any load on their back or their core. They're not able to perform as well as you would think they would. Kendo body's a perfect example. Now, I'm not saying there aren't some sport-specific one-legged things, but they're not just doing a simple pistol squat. Like, for example, I know of some BJJ guys who do stuff with kettlebells to where they do a one-legged squat. Like, they roll, I've watched them do it. They're on their back, and they roll forward onto one leg and basically bring themselves up from their back into a one-legged pistol squat holding a kettlebell, right? But what is that training them to do? That's also training them to roll up off of their back with a load and then get up onto one leg and then roll themselves up forward. There's some sport-specific carryover for that for guys who do floor work. But the one guy I know of who does that, he also squats over 500 pounds and he's a 600-pound deadlifter. Just throwing that out there. Guy's also really strong at power cleans and stuff. So we've got a guy doing that as a sport-specific secondary exercise, and he's able to do that very effectively for multiple reps. But he is actually using it as a way to train to get up off the floor. He's starting on his back on the floor on every rep. And he does enormous amounts of strength training with traditional barbell work accordingly, and it helps. He's actually pretty good. He's actually pretty good at his sport. He's also obviously done powerlifting and other stuff in the past too. But there is the difference. Okay, that makes sense, but that's a sport-specific application, but he still built his leg strength getting under a heavy-ass barbell. Because that trains your core, it trains your back, everything else to work concurrently with your legs. It doesn't matter that this one-legged stuff is hard. It doesn't mean you're going to get an ideal training response from it. Same thing, guys will say, well, you can say that calisthenics aren't that. I never say calisthenics aren't that great. I think they need to be weighted to get the most out of them. I believe in proper loading, which makes them not calisthenics. I think dips and pull-ups and everything else are fantastic exercises. I think those are some of the best exercises ever invented. But you need to be able to load them. If you really, really want to get strong doing them, or build muscle doing them, ideally you need to be able to load them with weight on top of it. I saw someone say that in the comments yesterday, well, try doing 30 dips. And it's like, okay, how is that going to give me a better training response than a proper bench press protocol for the same muscles? It might be hard. Sure, doing 30 dips is pretty hard. Do you think doing 25 to 30 rep sets on dips every day is the best way to maximally develop your upper body strength, size, and power? Do you think that's the case? I don't think that it is. I'm not saying you won't get stronger and bigger doing it. Of course you will. You're going to get bigger. If you can do 30 dips, you're going to get bigger. But is that an ideal training response? I don't think that it is. We can do better than that with what we have available easily. Not that it's terrible, because it's not. It's just better methods. Same thing, you know, burpees come up. I'd mentioned that I don't see the point of a burpee. I see that on my private social media, and a number of people talking about it. Someone I know who's done some CrossFit. Well, what do you mean? Do you feel that you don't get tired doing them? I'm like, well, that's kind of besides the point, isn't it? What possible training benefit would I get from them? Do you think they're going to make me more explosive? Really, I could do some heavy pause squats. We could do some jumping squats. We could do some power cleans. We can do some power snatches. And I can assure you the power development from any of those 4 things is going to massively exceed anything you could ever get out of a burpee. It's not a good conditioning tool. We have better forms of conditioning. I don't think it's a particularly good exercise. I don't see what role it fills, what niche it fills. And that's the point, guys, when we look at all these different things. Because you perceive something as hard or exhausting or difficult doesn't mean that you're going to get the desired training response from it. It doesn't mean that it's the best way to train towards a goal. And people, again, need to separate the concept of exercise, your immediate gratification. Exercise is doing something for an immediate effect in your brain to burn some calories, burn some energy, feel like you did something, feel good about yourself, put forward some effort. That's what exercise is. Training is a structured program towards a set of goals, either a single goal or multiple goals. It's a structured program over time in which you program everything to reach your desired goals, hopefully as ideally as you possibly can. That's the difference. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.